Hey guys, and welcome to my Laplace post-release review and analysis. We will go over everything that has changed when it comes to her kit, see if my first impression of her remains the same, and talk about the other things you need to know about Laplace. As a disclaimer, this video is not meant to stop you from pulling for a character that you like. Instead, treat this as like a preparation or a breakdown of what you're getting into when you decide to pull for Laplace. First up, let's talk about her abilities. Her skill 1 increases her explosion range damage, and this effect can stack up to 5 times and lasts for 5 seconds. The stacks are indicated by an icon beside her in combat, and this can be easily triggered, which makes this a good skill. But unfortunately, now that the explosion range buff has been drastically decreased, it pales in comparison to other character skills that also have the same effect. You can take for example Vesti's skill 1. It has way better scaling, the skill condition is easy to trigger, and the buff lasts longer. So Laplace skill 1 is not as good in comparison. With that said, this skill is not completely useless since it helps Laplace in scenarios where she is meant to be used in, which are stages with a lot of enemies. Moving on, we have her skill 2. Laplace's second skill lets her deal additional damage after hitting her last bullet. And this also deals extra damage for boss weak points. This skill is okay, more specifically in cases where you are using Laplace with characters who can reduce ammo capacity like Privity, so that she can trigger this effect more often. My only problem with this skill is that it has very low scaling, because when you look at the level 10 values, the additional damage is barely equal to one of her normal attacks when not doing a critical hit. Moving on to her burst skill. This one had the most changes out of all of her skills. First of all, the skill duration got reduced from 10 seconds down to 5 seconds. In return, the initial damage was increased, but even then, the amount of damage she's losing from not having a 10-second duration on her burst skill is not compensated by the initial burst damage buff. This burst skill will be the main damage source for Laplace in most scenarios, so you would preferably build your team around this and use units that will give buffs during full burst mode. Another factor that you have to consider is that when Laplace is using her alternate weapon, it will be a total waste of a skill if you end up getting stunned or having to take cover if a fatal attack is about to hit you. The reduced duration for her burst and the reduced consistent damage doesn't help her case at all. But you could also look at the lower burst duration as a good thing, in a sense that you're putting out the damage she is intended to do in a shorter amount of time, reducing the chances of you getting interrupted. Comparing her burst skill to Snow White's burst skill, it's really just night and day. Snow White's weapon has no set duration, and after you fully charge her attack, you can hold it as long as you want until you find the right time to use it, which means you won't be losing any damage from it, unlike Laplace, whose weapon has a consistent beam, which in some cases loses some DPS when you're not hitting enemies 100% of the time. Overall, due to the changes they made plus her very sensitive burst skill, sensitive in the sense that you have to properly time it or else it would be a waste, Laplace really just underperforms compared to the other burst type 3 characters that we already have. In my pre-analysis video, I also said that Laplace will be a good option for stages where there are a lot of enemies, which somewhat holds true after her release, but she is only a good option for AoE damage because we don't really have a lot of characters who specialize in that area. So by default, Laplace is a good choice, not great, but good. Moving on, let's take a look at some of the characters that you can incorporate in your teams if you ever decide to use Laplace in your teams. Every single support in the game will work with Laplace for the most part, but there are a handful of characters that I believe to be the best picks for her. And the first character I want to bring up is Yan. She is by far my most recommended unit to use with Laplace. She increases the charge attack for your team, she increases crit rate and attack, and she has a burst skill that groups up enemies in one location. This burst skill synergizes well with Laplace because Laplace has a penetration effect on her alternate weapon, letting you hit all the enemies caught in Yan's burst skill. The next character we have on the list is Admi. She provides more charge damage, increases reload speed and crit damage with her burst skill, and even provides a bit more protection for 2 of her allies using her second skill. Next up is Alice. She gives 2 of your allies better charging speed and charge damage, but on top of that, she also has really good personal damage, which makes her a really good pick for your second burst type 3 unit in Laplace teams. And next on the list is Privity. Privity brings a lot of value for Laplace teams. She deals good damage from her second and burst skill, but more importantly, her skill 1 is definitely one of the best skills in the game in the right teams. It increases everyone's attack by 23.61% at level 10, increases reload speed by a huge amount, and lowers ammo capacity, which means you will trigger skills like Laplace skill 2 more often. Personally, I'm running a team with Yan, Dala, Laplace, Privity, and Alice. I'm using Dala instead of AdMe because I found that I can't use Laplace burst skill immediately after filling up the burst meter, so I went ahead and slotted in Dala for that. Honestly, it's very unfortunate what happened to Laplace before her release. She was said to be extremely strong in the test servers, and then she underwent several changes and iterations. I also knew that she was strong just by crunching down her numbers. I knew that if there weren't any changes made to her original kit, she would have easily been at the top of the meta. I also feel like the changes they made to her were a bit extreme, to the point where 2 of her skills feel like obsolete versions of the other skills from pre-existing units. So in conclusion, if you don't like her design, if you don't like any of her voice actors, she is an easy skip in my opinion. I only pulled for her so that I can experience her kit firsthand and have better formed opinions about her, so that I can make this video to let you guys know how bad or good she is. With all that being said, that is everything you should know about before going all in for Laplace. Hopefully this gave you an insight on the things that you should be aware of before you pull for her. And as always, if you found this video useful, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.